our speaker today is a presentation coach. So his company, Ideas on Stage UK, runs presentations, coaching and training programs for business leaders and teams based on his best-selling book, Confident Presenter. So in 2024, Ideas on Stage was named Best Presentation Skills Training Specialist in the UK. Andrea himself has also been awarded Best Virtual Speaker 2024 in the Speaker Awards, which is very amazing. And today he's going to be talking about how to present effectively to win client trust and buy-in. And even better, he's going to show you a simple method based on 5 proven principles for structuring any presentation. So I know you're going to learn a lot today, so please welcome Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joe. Great to be here. Great to collaborate with your group. And today I've designed this session for client services directors and client services professionals, agency professionals. I've got mainly two types of audiences in mind. Either if you personally, if you want to improve your ability to pitch, present, and communicate your ideas. If that's the case, this session is going to be perfect for you. Also, if you have a responsibility for developing a team of confident, if effective presenters, then if that's the case, again, this session is going to be super useful. And you see, one of the reasons why that's important is because a presentation is a bit like a first date. It's an opportunity to make a great first impression. And the problem I see is that so many people and companies make the big mistake of making an invisible first impression when presenting. So it's not that they make a bad first impression, although sometimes they do, but often they don't make a good first impression either. It's just invisible. I love your cat, Susan. It's just invisible. And we
Sorry.
want to, no, that's totally fine. And we want to change that. And that's what we're going to do today. So by the end of this session, you'll have a very good understanding of how you can be more visible and impactful and effective when presenting your ideas. And just a couple of house rules here on Zoom. You'll see this is going to be a dynamic dialogue. I'd love for this session to be as interactive as possible. So two things. One, I think everyone is doing it, which is great. I can see all of you. That's amazing. Thank you. That's the best thing we can do to have a good connection with each other. So feel free to keep your camera on for the duration of the session. Also, from time to time, I'm going to ask you some questions. And every time I do, there is no right or wrong answer. But please let me know your thoughts, share your experiences and your ideas in the chat, and that way we'll make it more interactive. And I'm planning to talk for about half an hour so that we've got some time at the end for any questions. And here is my first question to you. When it comes to pitching, presenting, public speaking in general, what's your number one challenge? Let me know in a few words in the chat your number one challenge without overthinking it when it comes to pitching, presenting, public speaking. Remember, there's no right or wrong answer. Susan says, knowing what people are thinking. Perfect. Thank you, Susan. Nerves? Jamie? Yeah. Sarah, too much upfront waffle about the company? Yeah. Everyone has a backstory, and most of it isn't that interesting. That's what I find in many cases. Confidence, Jess, Ellen, getting a clear message across, tech issues, perfect. The reason why I asked the question is because it's important to understand what the challenges are so we can fix them. And if you want to fix them, if you really want to improve your own presentation skills, again, for you or for your colleagues, your teams, then we need to look at 5 principles. There are 5 key principles for powerful presentations, and that's what we're going to look at today. And here they are. Now, remember this word. You want to score when you give it, like in football, you want to score when you give a presentation, and SCORE stands for these 5 principles: simple, clear, original, related, we'll see what that means, and enjoyable. Now, in half an hour, I don't want to go long. I want to respect your time. We won't have time to explore each of these principles in detail, but what we can do is let's make sure that at the very least we cover 3 of them. So what I have in mind is let's make sure that we cover simple, clear, and related. But then, of course, If you have any questions on the other two principles, I'm here for you in the Q&A at the end. And I want to make sure that we are all aligned. Before we get started with the first principle, can you please type a quick exclamation mark in the chat if we are all ready to get started with the first principle? Just a quick, okay, perfect, coming in. Let's go then. Ready? Principle number one, simple. Now, as a presenter, you want to be able to simplify your message. Now, for example, if you think about writing books, articles, blogs, emails, reports, all experienced writers know that the key to great writing is not in what they say, it's in what they don't say. The more they remove, the better the article, the better the email, the better the book. And the same is true with your presentations. A very common mistake I see is that often, as presenters, we know so much about a subject and we're also so close to it that we think that everything is important. So we think that we need to communicate everything. Isn't that true? Including someone mentioned lots of background about the company, for example. But always think about your audience is if everything is important, then nothing is important. If everything is important, nothing is. We worked with a client, Luc Breton, great presenter, and he always liked to say, I only remember one thing from a pitch, presentation, just tell me what I need to know, no more. One thing. Have you ever thought about this? What's your one thing? Think about your next presentation. Think about your typical presentation. What's your one thing? If you were to summarize the core idea behind your next presentation in one message, what would you say? And how would you say it in a maximum of 70 words? That's it, 30 seconds. I can promise you. If you can communicate your message in that time, then you can communicate it in a longer format. If not, your message isn't simple enough. So give it a try. After this session, think about your next presentation. How can you summarize the core idea behind that presentation in a maximum of 70 words? And if you get stuck, if you don't know what to say, then try and follow this format. What? So what? What next? Here is how it works. First of all, the what. You want to tell the audience the what. What's the one thing? What's the key takeaway? What's the one thing you want them to understand, remember, and take away from your presentation? And that's important, but it's not enough. So what? Tell them. Why should they care? Why is your message important and relevant to them, to your audience, not to you? And then, what next? Okay, now that they care, now that they understand why this is important to them, what do you want them to do after your presentation? Or at the very least, what do you want them to think, to believe, to feel as a result of your presentation? And you see, that's one way for you to simplify your message. Now, I'll give you an example, and this is just one of the many examples just to show you how potentially this could work in your context. Say, for example, that you need to give a client renewal presentation. Now, the what could be something along the lines of, over the past year, we delivered £2 million in incremental revenue for your business. That's the one thing, the key takeaway. Now, why is this important? Because that's evidence of a partnership that's driving real business outcomes. And in terms of what next steps, we propose a renewed contract focused on scaling these results across regions. Again, just an example to show you how potentially this might work. Out of curiosity, on a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 means that if you think about this idea of simplifying your message, getting to the core of whatever it is that you want to communicate. And by the way, this is self-assessment, or maybe it's based on the feedback you got so far. 0 means that you find it very, very hard to do that, to simplify your message. 10 means that you find it very, very easy to do that. Give me your self-assessment in the chat. 0 to 10, anything in between. 8, Sarah, 7, Natasha, Susan, 7 as well, Jamie, 6, 8, 7. Okay, so these are all good, positive scores with potentially some room for improvement. Okay, cool. That was the first principle, simple. Not only do you want to simplify your message, you also need to be able to create a clear structure, a clear storyline. Now, depending on the audience and what they need, depending on the context, depending on the type of presentation, on what you're trying to achieve, there are certain clear structures that work better than others. Again, today we don't have time to go through all the different possibilities that you have. But if there's one thing I would really like you to consider, and by the way, it might be something that you know already, but it doesn't matter whether you know or not. We need to make sure that we apply it in our own pitches and presentations. And I have a question for you. What's the most, let me know in the chat, what's the most important number in communication? Type a number in the chat. What's the most persuasive number in communication? 3, Natasha. What about the others? Any other guesses?
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
The question is, Sarah said 5. There is one number in communication, which is, and there is a reason why, I will explain it, which is considered to be the most powerful, persuasive, memorable number in communication.
Got it,
What's
thank
that
you.
number? Yeah. Zoe says no idea. Ellen 3, 2 from Jess, Sophie 2. Okay, we do have, let me see, 1, 2. We do have a few winners. The winners are, I hope I haven't missed anyone, Natasha, Ellen, Susan, because yes, 3. 3 is the most powerful number in communication. Why? Because if you look at how our brain works, then we realize that first of all, the human mind likes groups of 3. And also, in short-term memory, all of us, whether we are aware of it or not, find it very hard to remember more than roughly 3 things, 3 chunks of information. So I don't care, please trust me, nobody does. Whether you have 12 reasons or 27 reasons or 1,000 reasons why they should listen to you or believe in your ideas or support your projects, just give them 3. That's what people can remember. So your clear structure could be as simple as a quick and interesting introduction that catches your audience's attention. Then you communicate your 3 key messages, and then a powerful conclusion, making it very clear to your audience what your point was and why they should care about it. Now, again, I'll give you a few practical examples. Say, for example, that you need to give a QBR, a quarterly business review with a client. The 3 key messages, they don't have to be these ones, but could be results, opportunities moving forward, and then you can discuss, again, collaboration, next steps moving forward. For an internal leadership presentation, you may want to talk about the role, the importance of client relationships. You may want to share some best practices, and then you could also talk about people development. How can we develop a team a team of people who are able to implement those best practices? For a pitch or proposal to a potential client, you can focus on you can follow the typical sales pitch, problem, solution, next steps, or call to action. For a client retention presentation, maybe message 1 could be the results delivered so far. Then you can talk about the next phase and connected to this partnership, your partnership with the client moving forward. Again, just to give you a few ideas, the beauty of this principle is that you can apply it anytime. Feel free to unmute yourselves. Normally, how much time do you have for your typical presentations? What's the duration of your typical presentations?
An hour.
An hour?
Normally an hour.
45
Lucky.
an hour.
45 an hour. Now, this principle is so effective because whether you have an hour, 45 minutes, even less than that, if sometimes you just have 10 minutes, half an hour, you can always structure your thinking around 3 key messages. Now, if you have 45 minutes, an hour, of course you can and you should support each of your 3 key messages with some supporting points. Okay. By the way, just in case someone is not familiar with this is called the rule of three. You can Google it. It's not something that I made up. The rule of three, which is one of the simplest and most powerful principles in communication. Again, can you give me an exclamation mark in the chat if you can see how you can apply this principle, the idea of communicating three key messages, in your own context? If that's the case, a quick. Perfect. See if you're coming in. Great. Okay. So we looked at two principles so far, simple and clear. Let's have a look at related. What does this mean? I have another question for you. Let's say that in a couple of weeks, you need to give a presentation. And let's say that today you start working on it. Today is the day that you start preparing a presentation that you need to give in a couple of weeks from now. Where would you start? What's the first thing you normally do when you start preparing a presentation? And please, before you type anything in the chat, don't tell me what you know you should do. Don't tell me what you think you should do. Be honest. What's the first thing you tend to do when you start preparing a presentation? In just a few words, let me know in the chat. Susan, reviewing meeting objectives. Research, Sarah. Sarah, it'd be great to know. Feel free to unmute yourself if you want. Research around what?
I guess it depends on whether we know the client well or not. So it's not, if you don't know them that well, make sure you really understand what the ask is, what the client is, what their field is. And then in terms of if answering a specific brief for someone you already know, it'd be research around really drilling down into the background of that
Background,
brief.
the topic, yeah. Perfect, thank you. And I see Zoe chat through the brief. Yep. With the team working on the proposal, research, start, hypotheses, Natasha, objectives, insights, Jamie, interrogating the brief, Sophie, creating an outline, Kath, Ellen, look at previous similar presentations so you can replicate the format. The reason, and I like most of your answers. The reason why I asked the question is because the very first thing most people do is they just open up, I say PowerPoint, it could be any other presentation tool. It doesn't make any difference. And they're just putting together some slides. And we know that's not the very first thing we want to do. Other people, what they do is, now, for example, if we look at Ellen's response, looking at previous similar presentations, or Kath creating an outline, those kind of things, these are much, much better than just opening up the presentation tool. But even that is not the very first thing we want to do. Sarah, you were talking about research, and one of the areas you mentioned is research on the client, the audience, and that's the first thing. When we are giving a presentation, we are communicating with someone. So we need to start with them. When you give a presentation, it's their presentation, not yours. It's always the audience's presentation. Now, think of a presentation as a present. If I want to give you a present, it's your present, not mine. So I need to make sure that I know you so that I can buy something that you like. A presentation is very similar. When you give people a presentation, it's their presentation, not yours. So you need to make sure that you know your audience, definitely before you open up PowerPoint or any other presentation tool that you use, but also before you start thinking about your objectives and your outline, your message, what you want to say, because that depends on the audience. Now, in practice, how can you do that? I'm going to give you another practical framework. This is what I do, for example, when I prepare my own presentations. We do exactly the same thing when we work with our clients. I always start with what we call the ABC of preparation. ABC, audience, burning needs, context, which means that before you do anything else, you need to take some time and ask yourselves some key questions around these three key things. First of all, the audience. Who are the key people in the audience? B, burning needs. What do they really need? What do they expect from your presentation? And also context. For example, what's the duration? You told me, okay, normally it's an hour, 45 minutes. Is it in person? Is it online? Is it one-to-one? Is it one-to-many? If it's one-to-many, how many? If it's online, How and when are you planning to interact with the audience? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that if you don't do that, then you can't create a great presentation. You can. But the risk is that you develop a fantastic presentation, but for the wrong audience. For example, some time ago, we worked with a client, Marie from Paris. Marie is an executive. She's an expert in leadership. And she was invited by an association in Finland to give a talk about leadership. And she was super excited. It was one of her first international speaking opportunities. So she prepared really well. She knew her message. She told us that she had prepared 50 beautiful slides. And also, she practiced. So she was ready to go. She flew to Finland the day before the conference, then arrived there on the day, half an hour before the audience, because she wanted to make sure that she had time to set things up. And when she was about to connect her laptop to the screen, she realized that there was no screen. So, a little bit of panic, she went and asked the organizers, assuming that they would say, "Oh, sorry, Marie, now we're going to fix this for you." But what they did instead was they started laughing. They started laughing. So she says, "Why are you laughing?" And they say, "Look, Marie, you want to show 50 slides, but actually, you've been invited to give a talk to the association in Finland of blind people." Blind people. Now, I know it's an extreme example. It sounds like a bad joke, but it happened for real. You see, Marie was very well prepared, apart from one thing. She didn't know her audience. She didn't even take the time to translate the name of the association from Finnish to French, and she would have realized that perhaps there was no need to have 50 beautiful slides. So, what does this mean for you? If you want, you should want to make sure that your next presentations are related, which means relevant to your audience. Then before you do anything else, remember, you need to start with them. And the ABC framework, audience, burning needs, context, is a model, if you want, that allows you to do that in a very practical way. Now, again, in the chart, can you please type either the number 1 or 2? 1 means, and this is regardless of your previous answer to my question. Now that we talked about this principle, 1 means that yes, you do start with the audience. 2 means that either you don't, or even if you do, now that we went through this principle, type 2 if you think that you could do this in a more comprehensive way, analyzing the audience in a more comprehensive way. I see a few 1s, a few 2s. Okay. Good. Perfect. Now, remember, you want to score with your presentations. We looked at 3 principles. There are 5 in total. Simple, clear, original, related, and enjoyable. Simple, because the more you say, the less they remember. So you need to be able to keep it short, simple, and to the point. Clear, because your key messages should be obvious to everyone, including you as the presenter. Often that's not the case. Original, because you want your presentations to stand out, to be a bit different, so that they'll pay more attention and remember it for longer. Related, because it's their presentation, not yours. So you need to make sure that what you say is useful and relevant to them, to the audience, not to you. And then enjoyable, well, of course, if your audience enjoys your pitches, your presentations, again, they'll pay more attention, they'll remember more, and maybe they'll do what you want them to do. They'll take action. And if that's your objective sometimes, that's why these 5 principles are so powerful. These are universal principles of communication. Just so I know, we talked about the one thing, the importance of having one clear thing in mind as you prepare your presentations. I'm curious, if you think about what we've covered today, what's your one thing? What's the one thing you are taking away from this session? I'll give you a few seconds for you to think about it and summarize it in the chat in just a few words. The power of three for Natasha, ABC for Jess. It's their presentation, not mine, Susan. Perfect. Ensure we have a clear call to action, Zoe, the one next. Yeah. Often you want the audience to do something. If after your presentation, your audience doesn't believe, feel, or do anything new or different, then you've wasted your time. And even worse, you've wasted theirs. The rule of three also for Latia. They only remember three things. Kath, yep. For Sophie was the what, so what next? Yep. Sarah, boil the presentation down to one thing, 70. Let me see here. It's not 70 seconds, it's 70 words. So just to clarify, 70 words, which by the way, if you want to translate it, 70 words is roughly 30 seconds, more or less. Okay, cool. Now, I've got happy to take any questions. Before I do, I've got a couple of free resources for you. I'm going to also, you have the link here in on the slide. I'm also include a couple of things in the chat. You've got the scorecard, and there's a link in the chat as well. This is a free tool. It's a way for you to self-assessment, to assess your current presentation skills against the 5 principles we talked about today. You just need to answer a few questions, and then you'll get a score. It takes less than 3 minutes. You'll get a score from 0 to 100%, both a total score, but also a score for each of the 5 principles. And now when you take the scorecard, you can also get access to a free copy of my book, Confident Presenter. And the reason why I included my email address as well is because although this is not for everyone, this is only for client services, directors, or in general, experienced, like senior business leaders who are interested in learning a little bit more about how what we've covered today could work for you. Again, for you personally or for your teams, if there's any interest there. And if that's the case, I would be happy to offer a complimentary, no obligation consultation, which is a 1-hour conversation with me. If you're interested, you've got my email address. Feel free to send me even just a blank email with the subject line consultation, so you know you're coming from this group, and then I'll give you more information and we'll take it from there. Okay, cool. And potentially there's one more thing I'd like to share with you, but I can do that later. For now, I'd be very happy to take any questions. What questions do you have?
Hello, I'll go. How would you recommend you coordinate with, so when we're typically putting together a deck for a client, we'll have multiple internal stakeholders inputting into that. And we'll often have an owner of the deck who might be the problem owner that we're addressing, usually somebody who's doing the client servicing side of things, because we do the client servicing and we're a PR agency. So my team also do the digital PR side of things, but the strategy team and the creative team will input. And we often find, as much as you try to manage and direct that presentation so that it feels like one cohesive presentation, it can start to slightly fragment when you're trying to get different people to put in. So we toss up, like, should it be that one person who writes the entire presentation? But there's a lot more pressure on you then. Or do we need to get better at finding a way that all this can sort of connect? And we get there in the end, but I think we use a lot more resource than we need to get to that ideal deck.
Yeah. Understood. Got a clear question. Okay, so when it comes to like I call them team presentations. There's a team that contributes to the presentation. There are a couple of best practices for you to consider. One is, and it sounds like that maybe you are in a way following that best practice. Maybe we can do it in a more structured way. For a team presentation, there has to be I call it a presentation director. It's like a film director, one person, or it could be a small team, but even better, one person that has to be responsible for the entire presentation. And that person should not only be responsible for putting together the presentation, of course, gathering input from the relevant teams, but also live during the presentation. When I say live, it doesn't have to be in person. It could be in person, it could be online. It has to be the person not necessarily delivering the whole thing, but managing the whole thing, making sure that everything goes according to plan. So having a director, and also at the very least, you want to make sure that the handover segments of the presentations are well coordinated. Now, ideally, of course, you want to make sure that every single presenter, if you've got different presenters, or every single team is very well aware of everything that's going on in terms of the different topics, everything that's included in the presentation. But if that's, and I appreciate that's not always possible, at the very least, you want to coordinate the handover processes, which means that if I'm normally, Kath, do you have, for these presentations, do you also have different presenters, or then one person who does the whole thing?
Usually different presenters. Yeah.
So if that's the case, presenter one, not only does presenter one need to be prepared to deliver his or her part, but they also need to be prepared to make it very clear, okay, what's the connection to the second presenter, to the second part?
Right.
Because sometimes we treat different parts as independent, separate segments, and for the audience, they should feel that there's a clear flow. And it's very easy to just make sure that, in addition to preparing your own part, make sure that you've prepared it could be just a sentence, couple of lines that connects part one to part two. And then the same happens for the second presenter, the third presenter. So that, plus having one director coordinating the whole thing, that helps.
Great.
Cool. Thank you, Kath, for the question. Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got one as well. I did some presentation training about 10 years ago now, and it talked about the narrative and the flow of a presentation, trying to be more like the narratives we try and get our clients to talk about in their work. And that was really good. It is really hard, though, especially as Kath was saying, when you're up against multiple stakeholders. Everyone wants to talk about the creds for 15 minutes, and then the kind of the commercials get put right at the back, and you kind of end on a formality, however good some of the messaging was in the middle. And what's your thoughts on that, the structure and the flow to get across these 5 principles in the best way?
When it comes to, Sarah, when it comes to creating a clear structure, there are different storylines and structures and narratives that work best in different contexts. But if you think about the rule of 3 that we've discussed, this is the best thing you can do. It's super simple to apply. So even if you have a presentation with different teams, again, contributing to different topics that need to be covered, say, for example, that you've got more than 3 things that need to be covered. Now, we said that ideally you want to have a clear and simple introduction that catches your audience's attention. Then you want to communicate 3 clear messages, and then you get to the conclusion, which, by the way, the conclusion can be remember what, so what next. That also works very well as a conclusion. Now, I said, okay, 3 key messages. But if you have 5 topics or 7 topics or 9 topics, before I tell you, Sarah, what do you think? What can we do in that case to still follow the rule of 3? Any ideas?
I think you summarize them under 3 clear headings.
Yeah. So the first question I would ask myself is, okay, I've got 7 things to cover. Really? Are all these 7 things important? I'm not saying that the answer is no, but let's ask ourselves the question, because sometimes it could be that we just by default we include everything, but if everything is important, nothing is important. So maybe out of the 7 things, the 3 most important things are 1, 2, and 3. That could be one answer. If we get to the conclusion where all of them are really important, exactly what you said, rather than just, you see, what I find, Sarah, is that most presentations follow if you think about a storyline, there's a line which is introduction slide, agenda, slide 3, slide 4, slide 5. So there's a line, but there's no story. And a simple way to create that narrative, as you said, the story, is to group everything that you want to cover around 3 key themes, 3 key topics. And you can make it very clear at the beginning. You can tell the audience, today I just want to cover 3 things. I'm going to talk about this, boom, boom, 3 things. So by the end of it, by the way, instead of starting with an agenda, which is what many people do, start with a promise. Don't start with an agenda, start with a promise. And the promise is, okay, by the end of this meeting, by the end of this conversation, by the end of this presentation, you will what? What will they get out of it? By the end of this presentation, if you think about this example here, you will have a very good understanding of how you can be more visible, impactful, and effective when presenting your ideas. You start with a promise, you group everything you want to cover in 3 key messages, you make it very clear from the beginning. And there are more details. If you want, we can explore them together, but at a high level, intro, 3 key points, conclusion, that's a very simple and effective storyline narrative flow that works all the time.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? If not, no one has ever complained if a meeting finishes a bit earlier than planned. So that's totally fine. Natasha, do you have something?
Yeah, I mean, so I kind of straddle client services and strategy. I tend to do like write a lot of the decks myself, and I find it really hard to put one in presenting tomorrow, and it's just so many slides. How would you take something like with a lot of research and real deep insights and try and carve that right back and present it in a visual way as well?
The most, again, there are, Natasha, there are universal principles of presentation design that one should consider, and you don't have to be a graphic designer to do it well. But the most important principle, if you want, is to keep your slide as simple as possible. Now, in this session, I focused on your message, your ability to develop a compelling message, which is the most important thing, even more than slides, because often when we think about a presentation, we immediately think about the deck. The deck should be something that supports what you're saying, but your content, you and the way you deliver it, that's the real presentation. Yes, you want to simplify your message. You also should simplify your visuals. You want to keep your slides as simple and as visual as possible. It could be just a big number in the middle of the screen. It could be a combination of an image which is relevant to your idea and a few words. It could be just an image. It could be just a few words.
Yeah.
Now, I understand that often your audience and your clients want to have more information.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you shouldn't give them the information. What I'm saying is that a best practice is that you don't include everything you are saying on the slide, but you can have 2 different things. What great presenters do is they separate slide and handouts or documents. Slide and documents are two different things, and they should be separated. And I'm talking about the context where you are there presenting. It could be in person, it could be online, it doesn't matter. But if you are creating a document that the client, the audience needs to understand and read as a standalone document without you being there, that's a different story.
Yeah.
But if you are presenting, you want to separate those 2 things. You want to keep your slides, the ones that you use in the actual presentation live, as simple as possible.
Yeah.
But
And
then,
I think to your point, I'm going to leave it as a leave behind and then just take screenshots of the slides and then just have put those in one slide and then have 3 bullet points and just say, this is what
anything you can
research
do,
found, but refer to the document.
yeah, exactly. Anything you can do to simplify the version of the presentation that you use live would be considered a best practice. Now, if the audience needs to have more details, then of course, after the meeting, after the presentation, before, depending on what works for you, for your context, you should send a handout. And in that handout, feel free to include 1,000 words, bullet points, tables, data, everything. But we need to have that difference. Now, to use an analogy, you will never use your toothbrush to comb your hair. Very bad example if you look at me. But if you stay with me, you will never use your toothbrush to comb your hair just because it has bristles like your hairbrush. A toothbrush and a hairbrush are 2 different things, and you use them for 2 different activities. Slide and documents or handouts are also 2 different things, and they should be used for 2 different purposes. Most people and companies create just one thing, one deck, and they use that thing when they present live, and it's the same deck that they share afterwards. If you start separating those two things, that makes a massive difference.
Yeah, I was actually going to jump in there and just say exactly that. One of the things that I see time and time again in agencies is exactly what you're talking about there, where everyone just chucks everything into the presentation because that's what you hand back to them and you want them to have context. And we always say presentation is the it's the simple visual version. You're still putting the context into the presentation, but you have your version, your fuller version, as your handout to them afterwards.
Exactly. We should always have, you should always think about the presentation, the slides, as something that supports, reinforces, amplifies what you are saying, not something that replicates what you're saying. Because, by the way, people can't read and listen at the same time. Again, if you look at how our brain works, our brain processes written text in the same part that processes spoken text. What that means is that for everyone, reading and listening are two conflicting activities. If you show a slide full of text and you are also presenting at the same time, your audience will need to choose. Do I read the slide or do I listen to Natasha? It's not possible to do both things at the same time. That's why, even if sometimes it takes a little bit more work, but if we want to be effective, if we want to achieve our goals, that separation is crucial.
Makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone
I think,
else got
Joe,
any
we've
other
covered it.
questions? Okay, thank you, Andre. So tell me, Andre, what's your one big takeaway that everyone should, or your final thought?
My final thought is that if you think about it, any difficulty in your roles, in your careers, in if you think about the companies you work for, in the business, can be traced back in a communication to, it can be traced back to a bit of a lack of communication skills. Now, for example, if the business is not growing, then for sure there's a bit of a lack of communication skills. If you're a team leader, if you're finding it hard to motivate, to lead your team, sometimes there's a communication deficiency. If you are struggling to make an impact for causes, projects you care about, there's a communication deficiency. Any difficulty in the business, in your roles, in your careers, boils down to a bit of a lack of communication skills. And if you think that might be the case in your situation, that you need to be intentional about what you're going to do about it and when. Because you see, what many people do is they attend sessions like this, and then what do? Nothing. Or maybe they procrastinate. They think that now is not the right time, and so they'll wait for the perfect time. The truth is, there will never be a perfect time. The perfect time to start your journey or to continue your journey to becoming the best presenters you can be is now. Mastering the art of effective presenting, pitching, communication in general can be rewarding. It is rewarding, but there's no reward without action. So again, if this speaks to you, here is my invitation to you. Start your journey or continue your journey now. Start or continue your journey to becoming the best presenters you can be today, not tomorrow. Start or continue your journey to becoming the best version of yourselves as communicators today, not tomorrow. And I can promise you, if you do that, your audience will thank you. And I also want to thank you very much. Joe, thank you for the opportunity.